Hilary Gray. Welcome to Teachers Weekly. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Adrian Green, here to talk about two of the big 6 literacy skills. Today's focus will be on vocabulary and phonics. Green, can you explain to me what are the two concepts?
Well, I'm going to start with the basic question for you all today. If someone were to ask you how many words do you know, what would you think your answer would be? Would you say 5,000 or 10,000 or even 100,000? To put it simply, if you found it difficult to estimate the size of your vocabulary, then you should feel confident in knowing that this seemingly simple question is actually quite a difficult question to answer. When we look into this question more, we can make an easy assumption on the words that we know and the words that we know the meaning of. For example, on a more simplistic level, we may know that an amphibian is a cold-blooded animal. However, we may not know the specific information about amphibians and their development through metamorphosis, for example. This form of knowing a word can also be understanding the multiple meanings of a word. We may recognise that crane is a machine used in a building site and a type of bird, but it can also be used as a verb to describe a movement. For example, she had to crane her neck to see the movie, as another matter of speech. So if we begin to count the words that we know, we also need to count the various forms of words such as work and its variation to workbook, working, worker, workout, etc. When we think back to know, to the amount of words that we know, our vocab becomes much larger when we count a root word and all the related words as separate words. Our understanding of root words, word depth, and multi-meaning of words results in vast differences in our own assumed estimation of how many words we truly know. This is why, as teachers, it is vitally important for us to understand what the meaning of vocabulary development is. Statistics show us that the average child starting kindergarten has an estimated knowledge of 3,500 root words. Following this, a child gains approximately 1,000 words each school year. So when we know a word, it's assumed that we can read it correctly first. This requires knowledge of phonics. This means that learners have developed awareness and ability to hear, identify, and manipulate phonemes. Children need to be aware about the correspondence between the sounds and the spelling patterns or graphemes that represent them. Reading levels go up.
What challenges could students with difficulties in this area face?
Well, recent studies have shown that a student's level and knowledge of words is closely related to their reading comprehension ability. So when a child presents difficulty in understanding what they're reading, it may be because there's a disparity between their knowledge of words, or spoken vocab, and the words that are being used in the text. This may be that the student can read the word on the page, but not know its meaning. For example, in the sentence, all amphibians are cold-blooded animals, and most metamorphose from a juvenile to an adult form, students may not have encountered the word metamorphose or juvenile before. It's important that the meaning of these words is explicitly taught by the teacher. In short, the wider the vocabulary of the individual child, the more chance they'll have in identifying the words and attempting to decode them. Readers will find it a lot harder to read an unfamiliar word. Often children from low socioeconomic backgrounds have a lower chance of being in a language-rich environment. So children who are surrounded by a language-rich background are going to build a larger vocab knowledge from frequent conversations with adults. Children will struggle with words, but may not necessarily know what the word means. For example, a child may know the word work and be able to read its built-on word, workbook, but they may not actually know what a workbook is or what it's used for. This child may be able to create meaning from the sentence and the placement of workbook. However, a child who's unaware of the word work or what it meant will have a greater difficulty in making meaning from what they're reading. A typically developing child would have already learned to talk by the time they begin to learn to read and write. This means that children have succeeded in segmenting the sounds of what they hear into meaningful words and have learned to pronounce most words in English. When children are learning to talk, they're recognising, representing, and storing their phonemes that they're hearing. When a word spoken by someone else is identified, saying it out loud again requires the correct phonological form, and difficulties that children may face when developing their knowledge of phonics is that the amount of time they're given to master a new concept is just simply not enough. Generally, in most classrooms, a new phoneme is introduced every week, and it's assumed that a child will have mastered previous sounds and be able to recognise them in text. However, this isn't the case in most students, and more practice opportunities to achieve mastery. Children need to have adequate review and reputational activities to practice blending sounds in different contexts. Another common difficulty occurs when there's a lack of appreciation to real reading and writing experiences. Generally, lessons are dominated by teaching specific skills and not enough time applying these skills. This is more commonly related to unrelatable or inappropriate reading skills in which children are using their decoding skills but aren't feeling motivated or enthused from what they're reading. This is where the problem of false positives may occur, as assessments focus on one skill a week and previous mastered skills are left behind. Within phonics instruction, children are learning digraphs, blends, vowels, and onsets and rhymes. So it's crucially important that children have opportunity to practice these skills regularly. However, one of the biggest difficulties children may face is the overemphasis of phonics and focused on isolated skills, rather than key aspects of reading. Children may have a hard time balancing their phonics knowledge and applying them to their reading skills.
What are some evidence-based practices for teaching these two concepts?
One of the most effective methods for teaching vocabulary is through direct instruction. This is especially important when children are learning a new concept or text. If children are going to be learning about metamorphosis and the life cycle of a frog, then it's important for the teacher to first introduce new words that they may come across, such as tadpole, spawn, and fertilization. That way, when children come across these words when reading, they're familiar with their meanings and can understand the context of information that they're reading. This form of direct instruction should be used in all curriculum lessons, introducing language concepts in maths, art, geography, and history, which are also vitally important for children. This method of classroom instruction is one of the most beneficial practices for teaching vocabulary. These new words that are introduced can be left on a word wall or even in a word book that stays in the children's desk. This is particularly beneficial as words are being repeatedly looked at and children are creating meaning from the text that they're reading as they're familiar with words that they're going to come across. Another useful strategy is to let children explore the words that they're using. A starter activity for any lesson could be showing 2 or 3 focus words and sending children off for 5 to 10 minutes to explore one word with a partner and see what they can find. This could be through using a dictionary, set text, and searches online. Children can then share the meaning of their words when time's up. The best 2 predictors of early reading success are sound alphabet knowledge and phonemic awareness. Without a deep knowledge and awareness of sounds, children will have great difficulty in learning to read. Best practices for building a deep knowledge of sounds is through teaching aspects of readiness skills. To start with phonemic awareness, children should be immersed in oral blending and oral segmenting practice, giving children practice in stringing word sounds together in a range of whole group and small group activities. This may be simply matching the letters to segmented words such as k, a, t, or even clapping out aloud the sounds in ch, a, n, and matching it to the picture. This is teaching children to blend sounds together and should be done regularly through direct modelling from the teacher. Once children have mastered the skills to blend and segment, children can proceed to CVC and CVCE words, looking at how words sounds and how an E at the end of the word can change the way it sounds. Another evidence-based practice for success is dictation activities. This can be as simple as the teacher reading out aloud the words, and then the students can repeat it. The children have to then sound out the word and show the beginning, middle, and end of the words in its written form. The teacher would then repeat this and ask the child to point to and say the beginning, middle, and end sound. The teacher would then repeat this and ask the child to point to and say the beginning, middle, and end sound. This dictation activity can be supported with the use of phoneme frames, where children are identifying independent sounds on a frame. Children should have regular opportunities to explore sounds and letter relationships. Phonics programs are most successful when students have regular opportunities to review their sounds.
How should teachers assess these concepts?
Today we'll talk about 3 different methods of classroom assessment. For an effective measure of a child's knowledge, it would be beneficial to do a pre- and post-assessment of knowledge. The 3 assessment models being spoken about today are the Vocabulary Knowledge Scale, Vocabulary Recognition Test, and the use of Content Vocabulary Assessment System. The Vocabulary Knowledge Scale, or VKS, is a self-assessment reporting instrument, which is useful for students' reflection on their own knowledge gain. The Vocabulary Knowledge Scale, or VKS, is a self-assessment reporting instrument, which is useful for students' reflection on their own knowledge gain. The children report their own knowledge of a teacher-targeted word and construct a response or choose a visual response, identifying how comfortable they are with their knowledge and understanding of that word. This is done before and after the word has been introduced and after the unit is completed. The second form of assessment is the Vocabulary Recognition Test. This is a simple yes or no assessment where children are given a list of words and circle the ones they're familiar with as a pre-test. The related post-test is where the children are given the same word again and then categorise them into the appropriate box. For example, if they're learning about bugs, some words might be leaf, beetle, and thorax. Children would then categorise them into places bugs live, parts of a bug, and types of insects. The last form of assessment is a content vocabulary system, in which teachers identify a list of target and inquiry words for the unit. These would be the words that teachers would be deliberately taught and displayed on a content wall. Teachers would then checklist the use of these words in oral or written form during lessons, and these could be carried across the whole unit. The most successful way to assess phonics is after each new phase. It's important to not only assess on the most recent phase of sounds, but also on all previous sounds to ensure the children have mastered the phonemes. Essentially, phonics needs to be tracked across the year for each child. Children should be assessed on oral segmenting of sounds in words, as well as oral blending of sounds in new and unfamiliar or nonsense words. Sounds should be assessed as being able to read out aloud in text, and as well as the written form as they hear it. This assessment should also be applied in sentences, and using blending and segmenting of sounds as they write a sentence they hear, or read a sentence from text. It's important for children not to move through the phases too quickly, and the teachers are 100% sure that they've mastered the sounds that they've been practicing. This includes getting children to make CVC or CVCE words with magnetic letters on whiteboards or in written form. Discussing with children the knowledge that they've mastered and working on sounds they may find challenging is important for their own improvement.
Effective development and learning opportunities for phonics and vocabulary is vitally important for children when learning to read. These are two components of the Big Six, and teachers should have a well-developed knowledge of these concepts and how they are taught in the classroom.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you today, and thanks for having me.